So last time that we met and we talked through the circular flow, we were primarily dealing with both households and with our industries, our factories. Today we're going to throw the government into this model. And up on the top right corner, you can see that I placed them right directly in the center. Depending on which model you look at, some models will move these different places. I'm not really attached to any particular location, but for this particular model, that's how it works. By the way, I'm not going to have you recreate this model on a test or quiz. It's just more of a visual to help us to be able to see how that works. And I know it came out a little bit small up there on the screen. So you can download this on Canvas. You can blow it up a little bit bigger on your computer. Feel free to do that if you want to see those a little bit more closely. That'd be fine. So we throw the government involved in the economy, and they are an important part of it. Some of those things were addressed last night in the State of the Union address. Some people agree with the way the government's involved, some people do not, and this is not necessarily the time to go into all of that, but we need to understand how they're involved with the overall economy. One of those areas is something called transfer payments. So transfer payments are things where there is no repayment expected for those things. These are things that are going from the government to the households, and the government is not expecting any payment in return. Can you think of an example of a transfer payment? Holly?
Didn't they a couple years ago send out checks to certain households?
Yes, they did. Yeah, they were economic stimulus checks. I was a recipient of one of those. Yes, that was pretty awesome. It was not for a whole lot of money, but it was a small bonus, and President Obama said, here, take this stimulus check. We want you to bolster the economy, so go out and buy a new TV, put it as a down payment toward a car, buy a computer, something like that, and I didn't. I confess, I did not stimulate the economy. I used it to put into my savings account. No, I did not buy donuts with it. I actually had some bills we had some medical bills we had to finish paying off, and so I think we ended up using it towards some of that. It was shortly after Logan was born that this happened, so I think we were finishing that. By the way, the hospital shots that they showed on there, that was a hospital that my kids were all born in. That's Kennestone Hospital. That's kind of cool. So kind of recognize some of the hallways and the emergency room sign and that type of thing. So transfer payments, stimulus check, well, that only happened once. Can you think of something that happens a little bit more regularly that we would see as a payment from the government that they don't expect anything in return? Welfare, good. Yeah, that would be one. Okay. People on welfare don't have to pay that money back. Some of you may be hoping for some of this. Tax return doesn't fall under this because technically that's your money that the government is returning back to you.
They took it.
Okay, what are you getting through FAFSA? Okay, potential, yeah, some of you maybe nothing.
$0.
I'm sorry to open up a fresh wound there.
We are getting something though, maybe.
Now, so some people will receive government grants for education. You may not qualify, you may not get any, but that is considered another transfer payment when you get a scholarship or grant from the government by filling out your FAFSA. There's the big one out there is the Pell Grant, and I remember when I was going through college, I got a decent amount from the Pell Grant, and they also had a state grant because I was staying in state, and my parents made very little money, and I did not make a whole lot of money, and so they offered that financial aid. I did not have to pay any of that money back. However, a difference between a transfer payment and a loan is that if you take out a government loan, you have to pay that money back. So I told you a few weeks ago or a week or so ago that I took out a small loan near the end of my college career. I had to pay that money back. It was a government subsidized loan, so I got a better deal than if I would have just gone to my local bank and taken out a college loan there. But I had to pay that money back. The Pell Grant that I received based off of my scholarship and based off of my financial situation, the government said, here's free money. And I said, yes, I will take it, and I will use that to my advantage there. So transfer payments, no economic repayment is expected. However, where does that money come from? How does the government get that money to be able to transfer it to those people? Taxes, exactly right. So taxes is where the government brings in that income. They put it into a fund that they call transfer payment fund. I doubt they actually call it that. But they're going to have that fund of money available that they're now going to distribute to people freely, whether it's welfare, whether it's economic stimulus checks, whether it is government grants for education. You know, there's all kinds of things out there. We've just listed a few examples where the government is giving away free money for things, but has to be paid for through our taxes. And this is part of where the whole budget argument comes in. Excuse me. Okay, so what type of things should we continue to give out as transfer payments? And this is where a lot of people in our government get all riled up and excited because somebody threatens to take away one of the transfer payments that was there. Or they threaten to, or they want to reduce taxes, which means if we reduce taxes, there's less money for transfer payments, less money for welfare, less money for college education, or whatever it is. They're going to have to take some money out of here if they reduce taxes. So while a lot of people with the president's new tax reform that just came out a month ago are saying, hey, that sounds really good. There are other people here that are saying, wait, we're going to lose out on some stuff because there's not as much tax money coming in. So that means we're not going to get as much free money back. But then on the flip side of that argument, the people who are working and paying those taxes say, yay, we don't have to pay as much tax money, so there's less money leaving my pocket. It just depends on which side of the argument you're on. And again, today's not the day to settle that argument, but you need to understand that there are two sides to every coin. So these are all the tax or the income that comes from the households to help pay for the government spending. Budget deficit's a bad thing. In case you didn't realize that. In case when you are doing your budgets, you come out with spending more money than what you're bringing in, that's a bad thing. We don't like that happening. But the government here spends more money than it receives in taxes, so therefore there's a budget deficit. And unfortunately, in many years in our nation's history, we have continued with a budget deficit. And when that happens, we just kind of push that off and we say, well, we'll add that to our national debt and we'll continue spending and we'll figure it out later. So what the previous politicians and generations in years past have so graciously done for us is they have pushed off their debt to the future, which means that at some point we're going to have to be responsible for it, unless we continue to push it off toward our future and our kids' future and just hope that we're no longer here when it actually all comes due. Yeah.
So does that mean that there will be some kids that they were born and they have like thousands of debt?
Yeah, well, if you look up the national debt clock, there's websites for that, it will tell you how much every American owes to pay off the national debt. Now, nobody's going to come and say, you have to pay this amount by March 1st. All right, that's not necessarily the way it works. But if we were to try to pay all that off, it is an unbelievable amount. So, a budget surplus is our goal. This is where we should be.
When was the last time we were in surplus?
No,
Like how long?
yeah.
Even if it was like,
Does anybody know the answer to that question, Joe? That's what I was thinking. I could not remember if there was maybe a year during the Bush administration where maybe they did. No? Okay. I didn't want to say for sure, but I think you're right. I think it was back in the 90s during the Clinton administration where we had a balanced budget. And, well, yes, we were still nationally in debt, but for that year.
But I'm talking like nationally.
Oh, national? We'd have to go before the Great Depression. Yeah. We did have one in 2001? Okay. As far as the national debt goes, wasn't there a point in... I'd have to do some research on that. I was thinking that we did get out of national debt through the course of helping out some other nations somewhere in the 1800s, but I could be wrong on that. 1838?
When's the last time we were not in national debt?
1838. Okay.
Oh, man.
So, yeah. So there was a point, but that was a brief moment in American history. So, budget surplus. When you hear that term, you hear politicians talking about that, that's where we'd like to go to, where we are spending less money than what we are bringing in. But in order to do that, what's got to happen? Okay, we got to spend less, yes, but
Are we going to do that?
what else? Okay, we're going to have to raise taxes would be a solution to that. How many people are going to vote for more taxes? I got one. Okay, what's another solution? What's another? You also can't vote, so then we're not going to let that work. Okay, so in order to get a budget surplus, we can either raise taxes, which nobody's going to vote for, or what's our other option? Cut spending. Okay, so
Don't spend money.
who's willing to take a pay cut? Brennan. Okay, so Brennan, we just cut your salary in half, and whatever department you're in charge of is just lost half of its funding for the entire year. Anybody else willing to take a pay cut? Yeah, most of us no. Now, think about this. Think about this in the committee meetings that we talked about back in government. These are the conversations that happen. As they have a budget committee meeting, every individual in that meeting is responsible for a budget item, and they start talking about how, hey, how many want a balanced budget? Every hand goes up. Okay, well then do we raise taxes? Nobody's hands go up. Okay, do we cut spending in your department? Nobody's hands go up. And this results in the stalemate that is our budget crisis that we just experienced last week, is that nobody wants to give up the money that they have in their department, but yet nobody wants to raise taxes. And so that's where the conflict comes in. There's not a real great solution unless you come in and just across the board, we say, okay, everybody's taking 5% less. And we're not talking about just your paycheck. We're talking about all the people that work for you, including all of the resources that your department has. So if we're going to take like the Defense Department, and our military is included in that, and we're going to cut everything by 5%, that means that's 5% less that we have on spending on our military personnel, also our military technology, military defense, and all of a sudden we're looking at North Korea and we're going, maybe that's not a good idea right now. Maybe we shouldn't be cutting down our defense system. You know, and those are the arguments they're having. I noticed the one comment that the Kennedy nephew made was the all-out attack and war on environmentalism, or I forget the term that he actually used. Well, Trump has not come out and said that, but in the spending cuts that he has made, that's what the reference was to in the budget, is that there's not as much money there for environmental protection as what there once was. Now let's throw in the final aspect here of the circular flow model, and these are financial markets. So the financial markets, I know we could just say banks, but it goes beyond just banks. Okay, so sometimes I've seen these in the models where they just simply keep it at banks, but I'm just not comfortable with that because it also includes things like financial institutions, financial brokers, even stocks and other finance companies can be involved in this. So when we talk about financial markets, these are any institution that receives extra money from households. They're going to take that money that you have left over, and they're going to invest that into other companies or businesses. So it could be something as simple as your savings account, where you have money that you did not spend, and now you're going to put that into a savings account. And by the way, just in case you have this fictional ideology that the $150 you put in your savings account last week is actually sitting in your bank. That's not how it works. They will take that money and they will reinvest it. They are using your money to make money. Now you in your savings account, you're making maybe a 1% on it. They are probably taking that $150 and they're probably making 5 to 8 to 10% on that money that you've loaned to them. Not to make you feel bad or anything. Savings accounts are a good thing, but they're going to take that and they're going to turn around. They're going to use your money to make more money. Now, they're then going to circulate that money, and it helps to circulate that money from the households to the business firms. So your $150 you put in your savings account is not going to be something that Subaru is going to come ask you for a loan of $150. It's not going to be worth their time. You're not going to know how to deal with that. However, if you put your money into Chase Bank and Subaru goes to Chase Bank and they take a collection of thousands of people's savings accounts, yours could be lumped into that, and they ask for a loan from Chase Bank to build a new addition onto their plant, you are now indirectly involved in that loan process. Now, your money is guaranteed if you are in a federally insured bank. So if you were to go and say, hey, I want my money back, they're going to be able to circulate that money and to be able to provide your $150 cash to you. But you also need to know that you're part of this entire model circulating money from you to the businesses as well.
Are there any banks that are not?
Federally, yeah. You want to look, well, if they are, it says FDIC insured all over their bank, usually on the door, usually by the teller. On the checks that you get, a lot of times they'll say FDIC insured. So banks that are not, generally they are insured through some other agency. What? So some of them choose an alternate insurance organization because they want to remain more private and independent. They don't want to be subjected to the government regulations. I don't know. So for instance, there are some online bank accounts, because they don't have a brick and mortar building, that the FDIC will not insure them, or they don't work together well, but they're insured by another independent agency, and so your money is still guaranteed, but it's just not guaranteed by the federal government. Yeah. So you definitely want to check into that, especially if you're doing the bank comparison. Find out what are the advantages of this bank over another one. Is it FDIC insured? Is it not? And if not, where's it insured through? So term here is notice savings, which I think is pretty generic, and we would say, yeah, I know what savings is. But economically speaking, savings is when households are going to put their money into a financial market institution. It does not necessarily have to go into a savings account. It could go into a retirement account. It could go into an investment account. So savings is going to occur when households put your money into a financial market institution. Yes, ma'am.
So when you buy stocks or something, is that kind of bypassing the...
No, because a stockbroker would be considered part of the financial market. So you are using that stockbroker to help connect you with that business. Unless you go directly to the company and you say, you knock on the door at Coca-Cola and say, hey, I want to buy stock. Well, they're also not going to work that way. But maybe a smaller company might. Then you'd bypass it there. In addition to savings, another term that we use is called dis-savings. Simply the opposite of savings. So you're going to remove money or withdraw money from the account. You could probably come up with a shorthand way to phrase that in your own notes. You'd be welcome to do that. The government gets involved with these financial institutions as well because the government actually borrows money from financial institutions, and that is called a bond. And the government often uses those bonds to help them buy items that are not necessarily budgeted items or when they have shortfalls in their budget. And again, it helps our money to circulate between all of these different institutions by creating a way here for the government to be able to borrow from the financial market. This is a really important concept to understand when you think about the government's involvement with the financial market. Anytime the government borrows money from the financial institution, that means that there is one less dollar for other elements of the model, so whether that's you as a household or a business firm, to be able to borrow. Because there's only so much money in these financial markets up here. And if the government has to tap into that, that means that you're going to have less money that you could go borrow or that the corporations could go borrow. So that's really a last resort thing. The government does not want to have to go ask for money from these financial institutions. This is also part of what economists will look at when they are evaluating the overall health of the economy. Is they will look at how much money is the government borrowing, how much money is available in the financial market, and who is asking for loans from those. If a lot of the loans are going to corporations and going to individual households, then that means that people are pretty confident in the economy. That means the economy is doing well. If the government's having to borrow a lot of money and there's not a whole lot available for the households, then that usually means the economy is struggling. So people a lot smarter than me can break down and do some analysis as far as the actual numbers on all of that for you. So here's the entire model altogether. Can get extremely complicated. That's why I'm not going to have you reproduce it. However, it is important to understand that all of it works together. And when we take our money and we put it into a financial market, we're not simply just throwing it into a savings account. It's also being invested and redirected in multiple ways. So hopefully that helps us understand a little bit better how that all works.